So we're gonna open the question and answer sessions. Before there are many questions coming in from the audience, but before turning to that, if I may pose from myself to you one question that is in this very difficult global environment and the geopolitical tensions, how our relationship between two countries and also Japan and ASEAN can play in order to stabilize region and also globally. If you have any comments on that, that would be appreciated.
Thank you. Thank you, Watanabe-san, for your questions. I think indeed you have pointed out to the most glaring agenda in the minds of many people, the difficult and challenging global environment, not by which a result of the still ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, but also strategic environment that has changed, has taken a change and made more complex, especially between power relations, as well as this year's Russian invasion of Ukraine. With all this coming in together at the same time, it is even more pertinent for small countries like Singapore to be even more active in trying to play an active role in maintaining that close relationship, first and foremost with its neighbors, with its partners, including Japan. By any comparison, Japan is much bigger than Singapore. But in the bilateral relationship between Singapore and Japan, I think we can each other help to promote the whole idea of the importance of multilateralism, open trade, free trade. One that should not look inwards, as it can be seen in the early days of 2020, where Japan and Singapore work hard together to maintain the supply chain connectivity and the message to push out at a time when the world was looking quite inward. We cannot afford to be inward. For countries like Japan and Singapore, we are we need our imports and our exports as well. And we cannot be inward looking without finding ourselves being crowded out. So in that sense, I think it is important for like-minded countries like Japan and Singapore to work together, both politically and economically, to preserve that space. Beyond that, Japan has been a close partner in ASEAN, testified by the 50th anniversary that we're going to celebrate next year of ASEAN-Japan relations. And that in itself, Japan has a big role to play in working with ASEAN to ensure that the regional peace and prosperity is maintained. And here I've outlined several initiatives which Japan have been a very active partner. And the most significant initiative which Japan has played a key role, if I may say, was the CPTPP, where the late former Prime Minister Abe had played a very strong role, and Japan as a whole had also ushered the members along. So at the bilateral, at the regional, and even multilateral level, these are the things that we can work together, things we can is within our control, we can work together. I think the contributions will help to preserve regional peace and prosperity. There are things which are not in our control. Major power relations is an important element because it will shape global environment. It will shape strategic considerations, but some of which are beyond our control. But yet, behind this major power relations, I think countries like Singapore and Japan can help preserve an environment that's conducive for cooperation to help push this along. I hope I answered your question, Watanabe-san.
Thank you very much. Very insightful answers. Japan and Singapore has a role to play in this difficult global environment, and also preserving multilateralism and the regional orders and peace and stability. And I very much thank you for your kind words about the Japanese role in the CPTPP and led by our late Prime Minister Abe. Thank you very much. And we have many questions, getting many questions from the audience. The first question to ask you is about high-tech and digital technology. Singapore is one of the big countries in terms of the advancement high-tech and digital technology, where Japan is behind in such fields. Could you tell us, one of the secrets should be the education in Singapore. Could you give us some advice from your experience and education background to the Japanese people for us to upgrading in terms of technology and digital side?
Thank you. Let me first of all say, I don't think I'm in a position to give advice. We can share our experiences. I think it is part and parcel of a learning process. Whether Singapore is one of the big countries, so to speak, I think it will take time for the whole digitalization process to evolve. So I would not consider Singapore a big country, but nonetheless, I think Singapore will be very happy to share our experience. We have come a long way in terms of our digitalization process. Even from the 90s, it started off with the e-government. And then in 2012, we started the Smart Nation Initiative, basically to push forward our digitalization process. In a way, I think education, it is about trying to inculcate a certain level of understanding, educating our people. But more importantly, I think in the whole process of digitalization, it's about the acceptance of changes that you can expect that digitalization will bring. It is not always easy. People's mindset are often very fixed. It will take a long time to change people's mindset. But if people can understand that digitalization can actually help your own livelihood, I think that is a step towards generating the understanding and acceptance. Because of our digitalization process and evolution, we have found that the COVID-19 pandemic had actually, in a way, quickened the pace of digitalization in Singapore. And not only that, people have found digitalization to be very beneficial, efficient, effective, especially in the days where the whole work working culture has changed. Can you imagine, in the past, people only know that you have to go physically to a bank to do your bank transactions. Suddenly, during pandemic, either it is a lockdown somewhere, a circuit breaker in Singapore, or state of emergency in Japan, you suddenly find that people are reluctant to go out, they don't dare to go out, or they don't want to go out. So you need tools to help them in their daily life. Of course, one of which was banking facilities. And if there was digitalization process, people found out that it really helped a lot. So to me, I think you can prepare all the younger generation in terms of making sure that in the university courses that you start early, or even as early as in secondary school. When we first started on our so-called what we call the electronic technology age in the 90s, we make sure that our students, even in the Shogakko and Chugakko, that they are computer literate. And of course, in university, you start pushing having computer science courses, you have technology courses, infocom courses, all this slowly build up. But as I mentioned, you can prepare the education, you can prepare the hardware, but it is a software, the people's mindset, that has to be able to accept it. And of course, in Singapore, we believe in the philosophy of leaving no man behind. So even the younger one could adapt very quickly to all these changes. There will be a segment that will be it will take time for them to change, and that's the elderly. So what we do in Singapore is that we push out volunteers. They are young students, young professionals who volunteered to go to community, at the community level, to help the elderlies be familiar with modern technology, smartphones, the use of e-commerce. And these are done at a very community level, spread out across Singapore. Of course, we can do it because Singapore is relatively small. Like I say, the size of Awajishima. But I believe Japan has the capacity to push through. You have the technology. I think what needs to be elevated will be a changing mindset.
Thank you very much. Mindset is quite important, and I think Singapore is very flexible to respond changes in terms of technology and in terms of regional and global environment. So in that respect, we can learn a lot from Singapore. Thank you very much for your excellent answer. Next question is a bit different angle. Ambassador, you also served as ambassador to Republic of Korea. So could you tell us about the difference between Japan and Korea and what makes each country attractive? It might be a good question, not a good question to ask high level, but if you have any comment on that.
Well, let me just say that I think I've been very fortunate to be able to serve in both Japan and Korea. Of course, this is my third posting in Japan. So the total number of years in Japan is much longer. In fact, this year is my 10th year in Japan across 3 postings. And I had served 4 years in Korea. I think they are both exciting in their own ways. I believe that I think the difference will probably lies in the ways things are done. In Japan, I think there is a very strong culture of Nimawashi. It is well known in all Japanese business management, we learn this term, nimawashi. Not just business, I think everywhere. There are strong points for it because you really come together as a group and you work as a group. And when you make a decision, you move with it. In Korea, they also discuss, but I think in a way, Koreans are very adventurous. And they have a culture which is actually very much reflected in a Korean word in the Korean language. Amongst the crowd today, I'm sure there'll be people who speak Korean. There's one particular word that says pali-pali, which I think if I translate to Japanese is hayaku, hayaku. Or in English, quickly, quickly. I think that is actually quite a strong statement in the Korean culture and way of doing things. And they like to do things in a very quick manner. I think there's a belief in Korea that time waits for no man. So this is a very interesting contrast. I think both society have their strong points. Difficult for me to draw any conclusion, but for Singaporean like me, being posted to both Korea and Japan, I have no choice but to only adapt to how both societies work. As the Japanese saying say, go ni reba, go ni shitagai. So I hope I've answered your question.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, for answering a very difficult questions and in a smart way. Thank you very much. And also another question also related to the competence and competitiveness of Singapore. One of the reasons for the Singapore competitiveness is human resources and also competent government that has made Singapore nation of one of the top 5 richest countries in the world. Do you think this model will be adapted to the Japanese case?
First of all, thank you for your very kind words on our governance. But whether this could be adopted, again, I don't think I'm in a position to tell you so. Each country will need to adapt any model to local peculiarities. Each country will have their own local environment to consider and local factors to consider. As I mentioned, sometimes I personally think that size is important, and it's important in many ways. Singapore is small, but in this particular case, I think precisely because we are small, we are able to maneuver probably more flexibly, and we can move as a nation. But can this model work in other countries? I don't know. You are, I don't know how many times bigger than Singapore. Whether many Singapores can work in Japan, again, I don't know. But what I think we need to remember is in everything that we learn, we would have to tailor it to our local conditions and make it work within the local constraint. As I mentioned in my presentation, in the late 60s, in the early 70s, we had learned a lot from Japan. We can't learn everything. Japan is so much bigger. But we picked certain things that we think in our own society at that time, it could help us move along. What was our concern at that time? Security. We needed to have a strong homeland security. How do we do it? We came to Japan and we saw your Koban system, a system that is localized, a system that you can put in any part of local precinct that can help a group of community. And that system was replicated. And of course, we had to tailor it according to our local conditions as well. Today, if you go to Singapore, you'll find many Koban lookalike, or we call it the neighborhood police posts in Singapore. So is it a question of adapting fully? Yes and no, but I think we have to tailor it according to what fits us. So in my roundabout way of answering your question, we share experiences. I cannot advise you whether you can just take the entire Singapore model and put it into Japan. I think it's probably not possible in any country. But I think along the way, we can learn from each other. We can share our experience. And then you see how you fit into your society. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you very much. Yes, we can learn a lot from each other, but in the end, we have to think by ourselves. That way, I take your message. Thank you very much. Sorry, many questions are coming in, and if I may have a couple of questions more.
Sure. Sure.
The next question is regarding trade agreements like CPTPP and DPA and IPEF. So if you, first of all, what's your assessment of, over the weekend, IPEF ministerial launched the process very successfully. If you have any comments on that, that would be appreciated. And also, our audience are asking about DPA and if Japan when do you expect when Japan joined the DPA framework or that kind of things? So many frameworks.
Sure. Yeah, first of all, as I mentioned in my presentation, I think there are many initiatives that Singapore and Japan have been part of, but have been working together very closely, as we have seen in the CPTPP. The weekend IPEF that you mentioned, it's a welcome development. It is also an initiative that really puts together like-minded countries to have the shared vision of wanting to make this region a better one. IPEF is a good initiative. Personally, if you ask me, I don't think it can replace CPTPP, but it's a good supplement and it gives an important message of the US continued interest in the region. That is important. On DPA, Singapore is very active on DPA, especially this is on digital economy. And as the ambassador here, I've also been working quite closely to convince your colleagues at Tsusansho, my friends in Gaimusho, to think about DPA. Much deeper about DPA. When Japan will come on board, I think this question you're going to ask them. I cannot answer. But whatever the case may be, I think these are some of the networks that we think we should come together. And whether it is a FTA, a CPTPP, or in today's term, a DEPA, a Digital Economy Partnership Agreement. That is something that can help bridge the gap and find ways for like-minded countries together to make the region and the place surrounding us a better one. Thank you.
Thank you. On DEPA, I'm going to ask my colleagues in METI.
Anyone here can give an answer now?
Maybe later they'll get in touch with you. Thank you very much. And a different question is, we understand that Singapore is preparing the handover power to next leader. How do you think Singapore will change in the next decades?
It's a difficult question. I'm a bureaucrat. No, but I think let's put it this way. Singapore has always planned for our succession, or rather, should I say that the Singapore leaders always plan the succession issue in a very systematic way. If you can trace back all the way from our founding Prime Minister, Mr. Lee Kuan Yew, to Mr. Goh Chok Tong and Mr. Lee Hsien Loong, and probably to the next one, Mr. Lawrence Wong. It has always been a self-renewal policy or self-renewal approach, where each leader will want to prepare in a very systematic way their successor. For a very simple reason, we want to continue the policy that we have always done. Policy in a general sense, of course, specific policy will need to be tweaked, will need to be either changed or tweaks should be made in accordance to the time of that era. But as a general policy, what will be of interest to our partners will Singapore continue to be investment friendly? Will our policies continue to be friendly to our partners? And I can tell you that Singapore, being a small country, we would still need to welcome foreign investment. It is also important for us to attract foreign talent. So in that respect, I think the overall policy in terms of being investment-friendly environment and policies and schemes to help foreign partners and investors, that I don't think it will change much. At the end of the day, each and every Singapore leader have only one thing in mind. Whatever the policies are, it has to improve the livelihood of the people. It is at the end of the day, the welfare of the people that the government has in mind. So for that, in terms of foreign partners, I'm almost certain that we will still be equally welcoming when there's a change in the leadership. It will not be an abrupt one.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you for, thank you. And sorry, next question is on the macroeconomic side. How does the price increase and currency fluctuation impacted on the Singaporean economy?
I think this question is not just peculiar to Singapore. It is probably the same elsewhere. Probably you are asking this question because I think Japan is seeing that changes much more. But as Japanese talk about the increase in your daily food, for example, your udon has gone up from 330 to 380 yen. I mean, the food prices in Singapore have also gone up. And the inflationary pressures are there, currency fluctuations, as you mentioned. But again, these are not peculiar to a single country. But in Singapore, we are quite clear that this is going to be one of our biggest challenge going forward. Both not just about what the changes that has been brought about in Singapore, but also the global economic situation due to inflation. It's made worse, I think, because of recent events. You see energy prices skyrocketed, and in turn, all the downstream effects, even all the way to your goods of wheat. All this will eventually trigger down to the lowest level, which again will be the livelihood of people. So I think not just in Singapore, every government is taking a very serious view on all this. And therefore, I think it's even more important for countries like Singapore and Japan to work together to see how we can navigate these challenges. There's no simple answer. It's probably not just so simple as to do one thing and do another thing. I think it has to be a multitude of various measures, cooperation and partnership. It's about how we deal with the global economic situation. And herein, I think cooperation is even much more needed than before.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Many questions are still coming from the audience, but maybe time is short. So maybe this will be the last question to you. And,
sure.
The question is, Japan has enjoyed a long period of peace and stability, but in this difficult global environment, security issues is high on the policy agenda in Tokyo. So, and Singapore is considered for a long time international security as a top priority of the policy agenda. Do you have any advice to Japan on that respect? That was a question from the audience.
Again, I don't profess to have any specific advice, but I think what the question suggests is a very pertinent point. We can never take security for granted, especially regional security. And that's why I think if you look at our policy in Singapore, our first and foremost concern will be the region around us. And that's why we have ASEAN that was established since 1967 to really make sure that our home ground, so to speak, our backyard of the region remains and continue to be a peaceful and prosperous country. And all of us don't take regional security for granted. And from ASEAN, we have branched out to partners with our, what we call dialogue partners, of which Japan is one of the oldest partners. And again, it is about trying to come together to forge common understanding, build mutual trust, and ensure that any problem that arises, whether bilaterally or regionally, we can come to some kind of common understanding, agreement, or acceptance, and to ensure that the region continues to be prosperous. Security in itself is also linked to economy. If the region is not secure, if the region is not in order, you will never be able to attract foreign partners. So for Singapore, a small country, first and foremost, we make sure that we have a welcoming environment and policies for foreign investors. And in our neighborhood, we play our part in working with our ASEAN brothers to make sure that ASEAN is attractive to outside partners. And together with like-minded countries like Japan, we make sure that a broader region of Asia Pacific, working with the United States, to make sure that the whole Asia Pacific is also an attractive area. So I think like I said, I think we cannot take security for granted, but over the decades, we have worked quite closely with Japan, even on the security area. In fact, the whole concept of Indo-Pacific outlook, Japan was one of a very active contributor. We have our ASEAN outlook for Indo-Pacific. Japan has spoken about Indo-Pacific, so has the United States, the Australian. But whatever you may call it, as long as it helps the region to prosper, to keep our economies open, to have belief in multilateral trade, believe in multilateralism, and to have believe in the principles of the rules of law, and something that can help the region prosper together, we are in there as partners. So I think this is quite important, where both security and economics are closely intertwined. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. You touched upon the ASEAN, and earlier you also mentioned our 50th anniversary between Japan and ASEAN friendship. So Japan too would like to renew our partnership and commitment with Singapore and ASEAN to create a common future. Thank you very much, Ambassador. You have been, we indulge you on your kindness, but you have been very open-minded and very frank, and I think our audience today appreciate your presence and presentation today. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
So let us close the session. Thank you, everyone, for participating. Thank you, Ambassador, again.
Thank you. Thank you, Watanabe-san. Thank you.